Welcome to Cross Border Interviews, the show where we dive into the insights of municipal political leaders from across Canada. Now, our mission on the show is quite simple. Shine a light on the dedicated individuals who day in and day out work around the council table for the communities that we call home. And for today's episode, we are honored to be sitting down and chatting with City of Beaumont, Alberta Councillor Philip Penrod. Beaumont is one of Alberta's 4 officially bilingual municipalities and the 3rd fastest growing city in the province of Alberta. Located just minutes south of Edmonton and in close proximity to the QE2 highway and Edmonton International Airport, Beaumont has a young, dynamic, and well-educated population of more than 21,000 residents. Since the 1970s, the city of Beaumont has experienced phenomenal population growth, largely due to the housing industry. In fact, from 1978 to 1984, Beaumont, Alberta recorded population growth rates of no less than 38%. Today, residential development continues to boom, and the service industry is also booming. This makes Beaumont a lively and dynamic community in which to live, to work, and to raise a family. From the smallest village to the largest city, across every region of the province, Alberta municipalities represents the communities where over 85% of Albertans live. AB Munis provides a united voice for 265 of Alberta's 330 municipalities, including summer villages, towns, cities, and specialized municipalities. As Alberta's largest municipal group, AB Munis listens to municipal leaders and advocates for solutions to their common issues. Additionally, AB Munis supports local governments by providing services specially designed to meet their operational needs. And they bring their members together regularly so they can share ideas and information so that their communities can thrive. Check out Alberta municipalities at abmunis.ca and follow them on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, now called X. Deputy Mayor, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting about yourself and talking about your beautiful community of the City of Beaumont. Before we get into what the City of Beaumont is for you, I want to get to know the man behind the persona a little bit. And I've got to start with a very simplistic question, but it's an overarching one. Where does your sense of duty to serve your community come from, Philip?
Hey, I was ready for this question because first of all, nice to meet you, Chris. Officially, it's fun to meet people that we get used to hearing in your earbuds. And so I followed the podcast a little bit over the years and have heard some friends and colleagues and people that I respect and admire answer those questions. So the short answer is, I think, really formative stage for many young people is kind of as we step out of our homes of origin and into young adulthood. For me, that looked like university in Camrose, Alberta, little liberal arts institution called Augustana, now part of the University of Alberta. We call it the South Campus. So the motto of Augustana is Ducere et servir. I'm butchering the Latin. It's not my number one language, but means servant leadership. And that was really inculcated in us, really pounded into us. Folks with gifts to lead need to deploy those gifts to serve. And so I really had some great mentorship at Augustana working in their residence life program during my time there. And really small college too, right? So opportunity to go over to my political studies prof's house and watch election coverage and, spending time with my economics prof and my theater profs in their homes and just getting to know how they moved and operated in the community. And to a person, all of those folks were volunteering in the community. They have these somewhat prestigious titles, but they didn't really stand on those. They were really about serving their students, participating in their community and contributing to the wider community. And I was so privileged to live in Camrose. I still admire it. Great system of parks and trails there. Spent a lot of time growing up there on those trails late at night, walking dogs and talking to friends.
So
Lead and serve.
how does a guy from Camrose, Alberta, become a city councillor for the city of Beaumont? Because there's a peg that you have to circle there for me, because it sounds like you would want to move back to your own community of Camrose after you left school, but you decide that Beaumont was where it was. What was the journey that brought you to Beaumont?
Sure. You want the long story or the short story?
We have as long as you want to talk. This is an audio-based, video-based podcast about interviews, so you take as long as you want, Philip.
Sounds good. Well, I will give you the caution. Vocationally, I'm a preacher. I'm a minister in the Lutheran Church in Canada, and so I can go a while. Although I like, as a person of faith, I've kind of taken upon myself as an elected official to reach out to faith communities of all stripes and build those relationships. I think they have a really great insight into what makes our communities tick, and sometimes politicians and religious folks don't know how to deal with each other, and so I try to bridge that gap where I can. But to take a step back, I will say I can't say I'm born and raised in Alberta. I was born in northern BC. That turns out to be quite a lot like Alberta in many respects. Fort St. John is where I was born. We moved back to Alberta when I was one, and I was actually raised in Strathmore, Alberta. One of the fun things, first thing that I attended was Mid-Sized Cities Mayor's Caucus event. And I sat down beside someone who I quickly learned was the mayor of Strathmore. But I realized, oh, he's actually my ex-high school English teacher, Pat Fuel. So that was an awesome little welcome to the neighborhood moment. Things coming full circle. So loved living in Strathmore, being raised there. Really formed me in many respects. Grew up on the rodeo grounds, now the Egg Society grounds, where I think they call it the Strathmore Stampede now. I could stand corrected, but back then
I think you're right.
Hooper Upper days. Yeah.
I haven't heard that in
right?
forever.
Hooper Upper days. Phenomenal. Yeah. So raised in Southern Alberta. My father, he was Augustana alum. My father really encouraged me to explore Augustana as a possibility. I kind of had my heart set on a big historic school out east. I had a cousin that went to Carleton, and I was kind of aiming in that direction. But he said, you know what, go up there on spring break, tour the campus, and if you decide it's not for you, I'll help you get wherever you want to go. And I came home enrolled at Augustana because there was a feeling on the campus that was welcoming, and that's going to be a theme today, I think, in our conversation. I felt like I was wanted there. I felt like there was an appreciation for my particular set of skills and interests. We'll call it that. And I felt like there was space for me there to bloom. And so it didn't hurt that they offered me some scholarships. So, right, any student is going to take those.
Anyone who doesn't take free money when they're in university, I'd like to meet them. That's all I can say.
Exactly. So, and then I came home and I watched my, my friends in high school struggling to remote enroll in places like U of C and U of A back then you had like a big calendar of courses you had to thumb through in person, kind of like a big old phone book, if anyone remembers what those are. And then on the phone, call in your registration. And I was just kind of like, you know what? They took care of that for me at Augustana in one afternoon. So wow. I liked it. It's small, didn't have all the opportunities that some of my friends did at the bigger institutions, but I don't regret it for a moment. While I was there, I also had the opportunity to participate in a Canada World Youth Global Exchange. And so I spent a semester living in what was then Hobbema, now Maskwacis, and then a semester abroad in Amatlan de Quetzalcoatl in the state of Morelos, Mexico. And so again, that was a year that was really formational for me as far as understanding what good community development looks like. at the local and at the global levels. And then I got a minor in my degree there in sustainable rural development. Learned a little bit of Spanish, picked up some skills in cross-cultural education and interaction, and then came home, finished out that degree, and along the way, summer job working at a Christian camp just north of Camrose in Tofield, where they have excellent ice cream. There I started to discern maybe a call to ministry. So that eventually led me to Saskatoon, where I studied my Master's of Divinity. But along the way, I also got married. So we spent some time living in Moncton while my wife finished her education, 3 years there, and a year of internship in Winnipeg. And then we were ready to start a family, and we started looking for a place to do that. And that brings us to Beaumont. So both my wife and I have an appreciation for the doors that having additional languages unlocks for people. And we wanted our kids to be able to have the opportunity to go through French immersion program. And so we were looking at St. Albert, we were looking at Beaumont. We had really great friends here in Beaumont, and so we chose Beaumont. And it's been awesome. We both grew up in small towns. She grew up in Fairview, Alberta, and I'm from Strathmore, like I said. And it just, again, just like Augustana, we came, we felt like we were appreciated. First thing that happened is one of the neighborhood kids knocked on the door and asked to meet our daughter, asked if she could play. And then they started connecting, if you need babysitters or anything, we can help you out. And very quickly we set down roots here. It didn't hurt that my partner Tessa is a family doc, and so they're in hot commodity these days. So people were very happy to meet her, and to this day I think she earns me half my votes at least, because she's well respected in her field.
They want to keep her in the community, so they vote for you just to keep
100%. Yeah. So long as he has this job, he has to stay.
But it brings, so during that entire answer that you just gave, I didn't hear one time, and this is the sort of the catalyst of what we're going to talk about your time as a counselor, but
Yeah.
I didn't hear you talk about you ever wanting to be a politician, that you'd ever thought about being a politician. Had you considered that was going to be a life that you could enter into? Because there's about 4 questions I want to ask, and I apologize if I'm going to ask them in a way that's going to sound sort of rude, but I need to ask them anyway. But I want to start with that. Did you ever think you'd want to become a politician when you were going through school in Saskatoon, when you were living out in Moncton, when you were living down in Strathmore, or was this something that came later on in life?
I think I've always been interested in politics. I actually met Tessa at Forum for Young Albertans. That program, unfortunately, no longer running, but sort of like a model United Nations at the legislature in Edmonton. I think it's St. Joe's College, just around the block from the U of A campus, where we stayed, and that's where we met. Model legislature, kind of learning parliamentary procedures and the Canadian system. If you can believe it, one of our sort of mock debates was on high-speed rail between Edmonton and Calgary. We're still talking about it today. It's been a while. That was 1995. So 30 years, I guess, right? So always been political. I think one of the traps I maybe fell into a little bit, because I talked a little bit about this religious calling and that faith element. And I think we have sort of a bad rule that we've internalized, that politics and religion shouldn't have anything to do with each other. And so I don't think I ever really believed that, but I thought, well, maybe I have to choose a lane here. Thankfully, I took a course in a summer session during seminary that was called Leadership for Public Life. And it was steeped in the traditions of community organizing, and in particular, religious-based or faith-based community organizing, from the kind of been more famous in the United States, but definitely has had some roots here in Canada. And that really gave me permission to put the two things together. And ultimately what it comes down to is that's a discipline where you really do the work to know yourself, and then be vulnerable to be known as your true self. And then thirdly, bold in challenging other people to be their best selves. So as we get to know each other, sharing selves and self-interests we can hold each other to be accountable in that kind of healthy form of
Is
accountability.
that is that hard in 2025 though? Because holding people account is so. How do I say this without being disrespectful to the general public here? But I'm going to paint a broad stroke. Send your messages to me, not to the council, not to the deputy mayor, because I'm saying this. But we live in a very politicized, polarized world right now. And my true self and what you believe a true self is, are going to be two different responsibilities and two different sort of descriptions of what you are for your true self and how you hold that accountable. Is it hard to do that and balance that act when you want to try to bring out the best in people, the authentic people that you represent and the people that you serve with? But in reality, because we do live in a polarized world, we just can't do that because it may seem unauthentic.
Yeah, what a great question. And I don't pretend to have the full answer there, but maybe I challenge the notion that it's harder today. I think it's always been hard. There's something in us as people that I don't want to say tempts. That's maybe not the best word, but misguides us to think that or to confuse that wearing a mask or being less than fully authentic will somehow keep us safe.
Yeah.
And that's probably true in limited scenarios, but in the big picture of a life lived or the entire history of a community or a nation, it turns out to be a bad strategy.
Well, and it's human nature at its core, right? We all want to feel protected, and
Yeah,
to feel protected, you do put those masks on. But when you're around that council table, you can't because you have to be authentic about the decisions you make. Because uh, voters and residents will call a spade when they see an unauthentic politician, and they're not afraid to do it on social
yeah,
media or in person.
yeah, yeah. And that's part of the polarization, right? And that's it's tricky. It can feel like a risk, and it is probably a real risk. And, I think just before the interview started, we were talking about perfection. And there is sort of a school of communications that says, say less, stick to the talking points, don't take the risk of being authentic or making an error. But I think part of what I'm struggling with, as I learn the role as counselor, is that there's a gap then. If elected officials are simply sticking to the talking points and protecting the legal entity that is the city or town, then everyday citizens who elect us, I said citizens, I want to correct that because residents is a better word, right? We're elected to represent everybody, whether they're able to vote yet or not, and represent them in their long-term interests for the community. But if we're just representing that legal entity, that there's a disconnect. And I think that's where some of the breakdown of trust is happening in our society right now, in our democracy. People are experiencing that as less than authentic, and they're feeling like they're not actually being heard. They're receiving push communications that are saying this is what we need to do as a community, but what they're not getting is the gritty details of why. And that's something I've failed at, I'll just say. Not always, I hope, but I've made my mistakes along the way. It's something that I'm resolved to try to do better. And so I'm actively learning how we do that communication better, and not just pushing communications like with that agenda, but actually communication that is a two-way street, that is really about, I'm going to be vulnerable with you and I challenge you to be vulnerable with me. Let's share what we're really about and what we're really struggling with and what our true hopes and dreams are for our community. And then together, I like to say there is no challenge in front of Beaumont that we don't have the solution to, if we can stay curious and if we can stay talking to one another. Because there's a ton of talent here. And I think that's true in every community. Maybe not as true as it is in Beaumont.
Little shameless plug there.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
you're right. But this is the part when I often get frustrated at. I understand that communication is a two-way street. Council and administration have to do a better job at communicating to the people. But I would take it one step further, and this is the part where I think I would love to hear your feedback on this. Residents have to go a little bit of the way as well. Because as someone who worked in the communication field for a municipality, I can tell you, you can communicate till you're blue in the teeth. You can try that two-way. You can have public open house. But I would bet every dollar that's in my pocket right now against every dollar in your pocket right now that if I asked you how many people show up to your council meetings every week, I would probably say it's less than two every time that you have a council meeting, unless there's something contentious that's going on. There is an apathy within our municipal system right now that is horrendous. I think we see the lowest voter turnout in all three levels of government, provincial, federal, and municipal is usually always the lowest. What role do you see yourself in ensuring that you try to communicate as effectively and authentically as you can, but knowing the reality that residents and citizens have to come a little bit of the way to get the information as well? Because unless you're going to go out and door knock on every single door on every single issue, I'm sorry, you're just not going to get everyone's feedback on what the city of Beaumont's going to look like, aren't you?
Yeah, I think all well said. Um, I think it's Dr. Jody Carrington that says things change when we stop saying what's wrong with that person and when we start saying what happened with that person. And so that's how I might reframe this. Not what's wrong with society, what a bunch of lazy, apathetic bums, but what happened to our democracy that led us to this point where I would suggest it's not that people don't care. They care. Like when you go out on the doors and when you meet people in public and when you take the time to have a longer conversation with them, they very definitely care. And that care comes to the surface when something happens in a neighborhood where people get angry or scared of a change that's going to affect them and their neighbors, where they live, right? Whether that's a disruption of an essential service or whether that's a new build or something like that. Shifting demographics can do it too. I don't think it's that people don't care. I think that it's that people aren't confident that when they share their thoughts, beliefs, hopes, dreams, concerns, they're going to actually be taken. They're heard, but do they actually make a difference? Are they actually put into the stew of the decision that gets made? And too often, I think the way that we consult, the way that we do public engagement leads people to the conclusion that this is a paper exercise. The decision's already been made and doesn't matter what I say. And that's where we can strive to do better. And doesn't always mean that actually we're able to do what people tell us they want, but we owe them a better explanation than we sometimes give for why the decision has gone a different way.
Have you found that yet? Because you've been on council for just under 2 years. By the time this airs, it'll be a year and a month from
Yeah,
when you were elected.
yeah.
Um, have you been able to find that balance of being able to bring people along to communicate with them? Because you drank from a fire hose. Because for those who don't know, you get elected in a by-election in October, which in October, for most people who don't know, you have to pass a budget within the next few months. And that means you have to catch up on a lot of things. You hear from the residents during that by-election of what their concerns are, what their issues are, what they want to see Beaumont be. And then you have to bring that into a budget cycle that has already been started by the current administration, current council. Have you been able to sort of find your footing and be able to affect some change of how you can authentically communicate to people and get people to engage with you in an authentic way that they feel like they're not being heard, but they're feeling like they're actually saying something that matters to the people who are making the decisions?
Yeah, not perfectly, but it is something that you said it well, right? I actually had my eyes fairly wide open as to what I was getting myself into, thanks to a lot of good advice from people who've done the work before me. But it's still like understanding the idea of it in your head and the reality of it in your heart are two different things. So it is 100% drinking through the fire hose. And not only are you thrown right into the budget process, but you actually are learning on the fly the procedural rules that you need to follow if you're ever going to get something done, as well as build relationships on the fly with the other 6 votes. In this case, we have 6 people on council and a mayor, so 6 other votes that you've got to convince at least 3 other people to see something the way that you're casting it if you're going to make any progress, right? And so that first budget cycle was a big learning for me. I think that when I've taken the time to reach out to people and have one-on-one conversations or small group conversations, I guess it's just the way that I am, that communication is usually well received, right? I think I'm okay with having a conversation as long as it needs to be. Not that we fully reach agreement, but that people can learn or understand that I care where they're coming from, right? And that's going to be integrated into decisions that I make on their behalf and for the whole community. I think I wear my empathy on my sleeve in that way.
So I want to talk about those decisions a bit, if you don't mind, because that is the biggest obstacle that a lot of councillors and mayors have to overcome in those first few days. Because you're a man of faith, and I'm so honored that we are having this conversation because I get to ask a question I don't often get to ask in this type of setting. And I apologize if it comes off a little bit insincere, but it's an honest question that I want to ask. We all have our own moral center of what we believe is right and what is wrong for our community. And as a person of faith, you have your moral compass as well.
Yeah.
But when you're sitting around that council table, you have to listen to all perspectives, the people who agree with you, the people who disagree with you, other councillors who may look at it a different way than what you do. When you ultimately have to raise your hand and put up your vote and say yay or nay, or I cast my ballot in favor of this motion or policy or bylaw or budget that's going to increase taxes 3% this year, just picking a number, not saying that
Yeah.
Beaumont picked that, I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah.
What what moral compass do you use? Do you use your personal moral compass to say this is what is right and this is what is wrong? Or do you use the moral compass of I've heard from the residents, and while I may disagree with what I'm voting on, the people I've elected me that have put me here believe that this is the way forward? Who wins in that ultimate scenario? Or does anyone win?
Yeah, I think the best way, the most honest way I can answer that is to say, ultimately, and this is the truth, I think, in representative democracies. I'm elected as a representative, and I'm going to have to make my best judgment calls on a given vote. This has been a surprising thing for me, how few votes are cut and dry. You might imagine that elected officials, of something is debated, and then you come to a vote, and yep, I'm either for or against, 100% either way. And you talk about polarization. I think we're tempted to believe that. I am constantly like the last one to ring in my vote because it's like a 51-49 for me. And I'm trying to sort out while the question is being called, taking in new information from the debate and stats and figures and conversations I've had with residents. I'm trying to figure out how to calibrate that decision in the moment. And it's tough. So ultimately, if I'm being honest, it's going to come down to my internal compass, how I can best do that. Because that all of the tabulations are happening in this brain connected to this heart and this gut, right? So I think that's the only honest answer. But I think
you're open to hearing from people, right? Because I think I don't
100%,
want
yeah.
people to go away and say, "Oh, Philip's just not going to listen to me, so I'm not going to talk to him."
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there are 2 statements that I've learned are often taken for weakness, but actually are marks of really powerful, confident leaders. And those are, I don't know. And as long as it's followed up by, here's my plan for how to find out and get that information to you. Yeah, no one can know everything. I'm constantly learning new things. And the other is, I'm sorry. Because we're going to make mistakes. If you're participating or striving to do any kind of worthy work, it's not going to be perfect. So you got to leave yourself the option of apologizing when a decision or an action has had kind of unintended consequences for folks. That's the way I come at it. I think those are superpowers actually in positions of leadership. And I guess what I would say is there are, I don't want to offend anyone here either, but I think that there are, sorry, I got somebody printing remotely behind me.
No
So
worries.
hopefully that doesn't go through on the
We'll
audio.
pause for 2 seconds while it finishes to print. I was like, what's
It's
going on?
it,
Literally,
it's
and
the
I get a phone call, right? And I was like, why is my
uh,
phone, why is my watch ringing right now? Who's calling me?
as we're talking about the impossibility of perfection, I'm not sure it could be any more appropriate. So yeah, so I guess I'd just say, for me, faith isn't about an assertion that this universal truth is true for all people at all times. I That's not the way that I live my faith as somebody who needs to convert other people to my belief in every case. I think part of the story of Christianity is a story of free will. And maybe the one who is a creator who could have the right to make everyone do it and see it their way chooses not to do that, but chooses something more complex and diverse in creation to let people and creatures make decisions for themselves. And sometimes that goes good and sometimes that goes bad. But I think earlier you said it was in our human nature to kind of double down and defend ourselves and keep ourselves secure. And I would challenge that. Like, there's an older story in Christianity. There's a story of the fall where people take a narrow view of their interests and kind of looking out for themselves and being defensive. But that's actually steering away from the essential human nature, which comes before that, and which is about being created so we don't make ourselves, and being part of a beautiful, diverse system. And so there's actually diversity in that story becomes a strength, not a threat, and being built for relationships. And I think I try to hold on to that as my roots, and that helps me meet people. I talked about the experience of a cross-cultural exchange really being formational for me. That helped me understand that diversity can be a strength, not a challenge or a threat, right? And that my story is not everyone's story, and that actually my life can be enriched if I can take a deep breath and like squeeze a pen tight because it's scary, but if I can be open to other people's stories and experiences, even that if they're radically different than mine. My experience is that my life has been enriched by that, and so I try to hold on to that personally, but I also try to model that in my leadership in the community.
I want to talk about the community because I just realized, because I was so enthralled in the conversation, that we've already been talking for about a half hour, and usually
Okay.
we're like in segment three. But that's the great thing about the show. We take as long as we want, and we have an authentic conversation, and that's my entire premise of the show: just having a conversation with people. But I want to talk about the city of Beaumont. But before I do that, I do have a bit of a preamble that I have to get off the chest, so that way people
Sure.
don't send emails to me or to you. This is a conversation between the deputy mayor and myself. This is not a motion of council, not a direction of council, not even a policy of council. This is the deputy mayor's opinion and his opinion alone. Now, it may line up with what's going on at council, but as he said in his statement a few minutes ago, he needs 3 other council members, or including the mayor, to vote in favor or against any motion, direction, or policy to direct administration to do that. So again, this is his opinion and his opinion alone. Oh, done that a few hundred times on this show, and I'm
I
still
think
getting
I've heard
used.
it. Yeah.
So, with that said, Deputy Mayor Penrod, in your opinion, as of this recording, in the midst of August 2025, what do you see as the biggest challenge or challenges facing the city of Beaumont today?
Thanks for the question. Awesome question. Beaumont has been for many years one of the fastest growing communities in Canada. That's because people continue to see I think I've heard on your program before, this saying like we want our community to be a great place to live, work, and play. People overwhelmingly see that Beaumont is a great place to live. There's affordable housing, great schools, fantastic history and culture. Because we've grown so quickly, we have a relatively modern build to us. And we've got taken advantage of that to create a great network of trails and green spaces. So it's definitely a great place to live. I think it's a great place to play as well. We've got our sports teams are well respected. Our arts and culture, I would say, group of folks participating in that punches above its weight. A challenge is the same thing as the strength. That rapid growth means that we need more of everything yesterday, but we need to build that in a way that also takes into account we're living in an era of inflation now, thankfully somewhat under control, but that's had real impacts on affordability. A couple global calamities in the fairly near rearview mirror. It's challenging, and housing affordability is challenging. Thankfully, still pretty affordable in Alberta as a whole, and certainly in Beaumont, broadly speaking. But there are, even now, we see this in our cities and towns across Alberta. There are folks being left behind in that, and that is unacceptable in my view. So, yeah, we need more of everything yesterday, but we also need to understand we don't have an elastic ability to just jack taxes up. And as a municipality, we have limited ability to raise funds, right? So it's generally through the tax levy. Major challenge in Beaumont is through an accident of history, we've sort of grown up as a bedroom community. And so our neighbors to the southwest, Leduc, I remember hearing you talk to a councillor there. I think they're split between their residential tax base and their commercial tax base is something like 65-35. In Beaumont, it's been closer to 90-10. So most of the weight, yeah, we're an outlier, not in a good way on that front, right? And
Yeah,
so,
that doesn't sound good for your property tax base there.
yeah, it means the bulk of the expense of running the city falls in the weight of homeowners, and so that leads to people being concerned, and rightly so, about any decisions that we're making to create a new program or build new infrastructure. And so that's something we've been working on. The good news is just around the corner will be the AMTA Safety Campus, partnership with Alberta Motor Transport Association and province of Alberta. More news to come on that front. Talking about controlled communications, that's one that folks are asking us to hold off on, and they want to make their splash at the right time. So, but that's going to be a game changer for Beaumont. That's a north of $200 million development that will unfold a whole new parcel of land for us and tie into the innovation park. The area structure plan for that's just been completed. That unlocks the next 30 to 40 years for Beaumont and will significantly move the needle on that residential commercial tax base split. But at the same time, we're building more houses every day. I think I worked it out during the by-election 2 years ago, and the population of Beaumont had gone up by like 500 people just in the election period. So that's the kind of rapid growth we're dealing with, and they all need homes, right? And so that becomes a challenge to address that split. We almost can't build businesses fast enough to offset the amount of new houses and new families moving in, right? So it's a challenge, but it's a worthy challenge.
So how I'm going to ask you basically to solve the housing crisis in a 30-second answer here, but I'm not going to hold you to it, but you are growing at an exponential rate. Now, the
Yeah.
last time I was in Beaumont, I heard from one of your fellow counselors that Beaumont can't grow north anymore because you were literally right on the like butting up against the city of Edmonton. And I would hazard a guess that Amarjeet Sohi or the next mayor of Edmonton will not say, you know what, Beaumont needs more land, so let's give over part of our community to Beaumont so that way they can grow a little bit faster. Not gonna happen. there are probably people in your community that will say, we are growing way too fast. We cannot keep up with the pace that we are currently in. But it's good to grow because if you grow, that means taxes are going to relatively stay low because you have a larger base and more money to spread out. How do you balance the growth of your community with the realities that you can't do it all on the backs of the people who are there right now? Because you're right, we were just in this inflationary crisis, we're still in it, we've had many multiple economic world economic challenges that were thrown in Canada's face, and we're still not out of it. And there are people in our communities right now who are living paycheck to paycheck. How do we solve this
Yeah.
issue sustainably, or is there an easy solution that I'm missing right now?
The short answer is no, there's not an easy solution. I'm glad you said the word sustainability. I think it's David Suzuki that says unchecked growth is the mentality of a cancer cell. So that's not me being anti-growth, but that's me saying not all growth is the same. If there's no purpose behind growth, if growth isn't driving the overall health of the organism, whether that's a cell or an individual human being or a community, then it's lost the plot, right? So growth for growth's sake is not sustainable. From a city perspective, every dollar we bring in new tax revenue from building homes and building infrastructure means $1.40 liabilities down the road to replace that infrastructure. And so it's a hamster wheel, and it's not sustainable. However, in Alberta, and in particular the greater Edmonton region at this time, growth is inevitable over the kind of medium term, 15 to 40 years, because of the success that we've had in developing our economy in Alberta and keeping our doors open and saying people are welcome here. We come back to that idea of welcome, right? The history of Beaumont is one of an established group looking around at newcomers and saying, we're going to make this work. We're going to extend welcome. Historically, especially from a colonial perspective, we've had some hard lessons of how not to do that. But more recently, we have lots of good examples for how to do that well. And we're seeing demographics changing at a rapid rate here in Beaumont, from an age perspective, from a race and ethnicity perspective, from a religious perspective, and that can be scary for people. But we need to challenge ourselves to be true to our roots. And that is, we are people who, in challenging circumstances, we open the door and we extend welcome. And we rely on this knowledge that we've hard won, that diversity is actually a strength, not a threat, right? It can feel like a threat when things are changing so rapidly, but so that's what we need to challenge ourselves to do. The growth in the region is not going away. So our best bet from my perspective is to stay at the tiller, keep the sails up and try to steer our growth in the best, healthiest way that we can, and try to hold on to our sustainability as a community from an economic sense, but also from a cultural and social sense. So that might sound like dodging the question a little bit, but the truth is there's not anyone who wants to sell you an easy solution to this. No. I guess the last thing I would say about it is we need to rely on relationships and investing in those relationships. So within our community, we need to support our neighbors. We need to, as elected officials, we need to listen carefully when people are telling us we're pressed, we're stretched beyond our means to cope with this growth. So we need to tap the brakes then, right? We can't lose the people who are already here. At the same time, we need to be developing those regional relationships, those provincial relationships, those national and even international relationships that can help us steer the ship of this growth. Right? We need to do our part to address a national housing crisis. I couldn't live with myself if we just said, well, let someone else deal with that problem. We can't fix the problem as a little community of 26,000 people, but we can be part of the solution when we're in relationship with other people, right? we
I love
have,
that I'm
yeah.
sorry, but I love the fact that you just said a little community of 26,000 people. Every community out there right now listening to this thing, what's he smoking over there in Beaumont? 26,000 is not a small community. Sorry.
26,000 in a nation of 40 plus million though is not that huge, right? And next we live next door to Edmonton. That's I think
True.
1.2 million now, right? So
And lives just north of Leduc, which is about 38,000, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, yeah. So definitely bigger than Royal Oaks, just down the road of us in Leduc County, Thorsby. And so it's all about perspective, right?
Yeah.
Do we have less resources and power than some? Yep. Do we have more than others? Absolutely. So we need to hold those. We need to deploy those resources reasonably and responsibly. And we need to use the power that we do have to address the common good as best we can.
So I want to turn to a third segment, and it's the last big segment before we turn to sort of the good things about Beaumont and sort of the tourism spots. But there's a municipal election happening here in, by the time we're recording this, 2 months to the day, October 20th, there will be a municipal election.
Yeah,
Have
cheers.
have you decided to put your name forward in for another term, or has your wife told you that you're moving as a family doctor? What's the story on another Penrod run for council?
Yeah, that decision was fairly easy for me. The only thing that it required was a little sit down with our family. I think my advice to anyone contemplating running is make sure your family's on board first because you will need every ounce of their support, plus friends and other colleagues along the way to make it work for you. Not it doesn't look the same for every person or family, but you're definitely need to you're definitely going to need to be in it together. So they were on board for it. From my view, 2 years has been just enough to really learn the nuances of the job and how to be effective. I still have pieces, a core part of my what I ran on to get elected was to be continuously engaged with people. I feel like that's an area where I've fallen a little short of my own hopes and expectations as far as my ability to be out and continue door knocking, for example, through the term. There were times that just wasn't possible for me this time, as I learned a lot of the other information, but also like practices of the role. So that's something I hope to improve on if I'm lucky enough to be elected again. I think I was the first one to have my papers in January here. So that doesn't mean I've started campaigning overtly yet, but I just thought I know I'm going to run. Why would I play games about it? Let's just get the paperwork in and aim for another term if I can be. All I can do is bring who I am to the table and my willingness to serve and represent others, and then ultimately that's what I love about our system. The residents will decide.
So this is a question I get to ask very few people on the show because you're relatively new and you got elected through a by-election. So this is still
Yeah.
fresh for you. What's the one piece of advice that you would want to instill about to people who are about to put their names forward and run in this election that you wish you would have known prior to putting your name on the ballot in 2023 when you got elected during your by-election?
Well, but prior to the by-election where I was elected, I ran in 2021, and I think I started too late. I tried to have a perfect campaign all laid out, all the steps before I started. And then I let excuses get in the way. There was a federal election at that time too. And so I told myself, well, people don't want everyone on their doors all at once. It's just post-COVID. So I started too late. And my advice is always like, once you have had that conversation with your family and your support network and you've made the decision to run, start. You can course correct along the way. The core thing you have to do, I believe, is get out and talk to people. There's different strategies around how to do that. I like door knocking because you can have those personal conversations with people. But you have to do a ton of it because you're only ever going to catch a small fraction of people at home on any given night, right? So to get a real representative community and to get your name out there and your ideas out there, you have to do a ton of it. But The good news is this: door knocking in our social media soaked milieu, door knocking will restore your faith in humanity. Because you'll have some people who are not interested. They'll tell you to go away, keep walking, whatever. And you know what? I always tell people that are with me, we didn't make an appointment to come here. We're just showing up at this person's house, so they don't owe us anything. If they're not for it, like if they're not up for it that night, just say have a good night and be on our way, right?
Yeah.
But so many people will take the time to offer you a cold glass of water, to share their hopes and dreams and frustrations about their community, to share a little bit of what's going on for them and their people that they love. It's awesome. And it's the type of vulnerability, availability, passion that you don't necessarily see on social media, because it turns out the medium does actually affect the communication. And there's something about engaging people face to face that we are built for as human beings. And as we're doing more virtual, we're meeting virtually. There is a place for this. And I'm so glad, because we wouldn't be able to have this conversation today unless this technology was available to us. But it doesn't replace face-to-face interaction with real people. And so that's my advice. Get out there. It's scary. It's hard work to be vulnerable in that way. But I think it is a non-negotiable. If you want to do this work, you got to be willing to put yourself out in that way to people.
Just to add on to what Philip said there, for my advice is the first door is always going to be the hardest.
100%.
The first door that you go up to and say, I don't know this person, I'm knocking on their door and asking for their vote, is always the hardest. By door 60, you're going to go, oh, why did I take so long to do this? But the big caveat is the first time someone says, no, I'm not voting for you, go, oh, okay, am I doing the right thing here? So there are pitfalls to door knocking. Just watch out for those. That's just my own personal advice to anyone who's putting their name forward. But
absolutely.
Before I let you go, I want to turn to my favorite part of the segment, and it's going to cut it down to 2 questions because I'm cautious of time here. What is your favorite thing about the city of Beaumont? What is the thing that you look at and you say, you know what? This is what makes Beaumont the reason I stayed in Beaumont. Besides your wife.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the friends that brought us here. We moved here because we had friends who were here and said there's great schools here. It's a great place to raise your family. At that time, we were actually needing to build schools, but that's a whole nother story. Here, I'll give you a less scripted answer that connects to the parks and the trails that people often talk about. I want to say the history, and specifically the work of the Beaumont and District Agricultural Society. And here's a plug. They are having their Rural Roots Fair this Saturday, August 23rd, from 10:30 a.m. till 5 p.m. Hopefully I didn't mess with any timelines.
I'm going to cut that part out and put it out on social media for tomorrow.
Perfect.
So
that's
this goes out next week, but so the week that this is airing, we're recording it the week of that event, but I'll cut that out and make sure people know.
Thanks for rescuing me from myself. Appreciate it. So as an Alberta boy, I grew up on the Ag Society grounds in Strathmore. This is an essential part of our history, right? And so that's what I love about also they have an amazing acronym. It's literally badass. Right? How good is that? Awesome. Yeah. They're doing amazing stuff out there. Community gardens, a food orchard. It's been for a long time the residence or the place where the local pony club does their equestrian exercises, dressage and such. But they're also keepers of our history. And in Beaumont, we like to celebrate our agricultural history, our French history, obviously, and also our Indigenous history. We have a surprisingly large Métis population in Beaumont. And so I have all the time in the world for the work of Badass. And they also have sort of a sister organization called the Beaumont and District Heritage Society. They have the St. Jacques Heritage House Museum, which is a little prairie gem. If you go to the Gopher Museum in Alberta, but not to this one, then you've missed out, because it's not super impressive in the way the Alberta Museum is in Edmonton. But it has a ton of prairie charm, and it's a place where you can come and see a little bit of the history. It's literally one of the historic houses built by one of the founding families of, at least European founding families of Beaumont. And yeah, lots of little cultural relics have been preserved there. We partnership with the society and the city, we moved that house from its original site down the hill to a spot where it can be preserved and people can enjoy it. And turns out, because of technology, they have a great heritage research center down in the basement where anyone can come and is welcome to research their family tree free of charge.
That's cool. So I'm gonna be up
Right?
in Beaumont. No, I'm not gonna be up in the Edmonton area. So now I have an excuse to stop in Beaumont, not only just to see you, but to go see this museum as well. Because anyone who talks about museums on this show, that or golfing, you've got me hooked. So I'm coming to the museum and I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. We'll make
So
sure you get some good baked goods from Chartier and Thoroughfare. No, not
that,
Thoroughfare. They've changed their name now to Bliss.
ooh, oh,
Bliss baked
bliss.
goods.
Oh, selling a fat guy food is not that hard there, Deputy Mayor.
After
So,
we research our family trees, I'll take you to Old Yale too.
oh, okay.
That's a gastro pub, brand new.
I'm gonna leave 10 pounds heavier. So before I let you
Yeah,
go, I have one final question, and it's the $1 million question to wrap up this entire interview. And you've heard it before if you've listened to the show. What makes the city of Beaumont such a unique place to live, work, and raise a family there, Deputy Mayor?
it's literally a shining light on a hill. It's this great integration with the local environment and landscape and the people. It's the people. It's those folks that when you move in, they'll come and say, "Hey, are your kids ready to play? And how can we support you? Here's some local baked goods. Here's something for my garden." It's the people all the way.
Deputy Mayor Penrod, Philip, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for sitting down, taking an hour out of your day to do this interview. It's always a pleasure to get to know municipal leaders from across Canada and particularly across Alberta, my home province, your home province. So thank you so much for doing this. And as I said, if you were up for it, let's grab a coffee and go to some baked goods while we're up in while I'm up in Beaumont next week.
Absolutely. I look forward to it, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity and keep up the great work championing the the things that make our democracy work. We need to do more of that, and we need to challenge ourselves to do better on it. And I think I love your approach, right? It's like a strengths-based approach, asset-based. I think it's always good. We know we live in challenging times, but like I said before, we don't have any challenges in front of us that we don't also have the solutions to if we stay curious and talking to each other.
They're just not easy solutions, as we found out today on the show. Thanks so much.
Always complicated. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Cross Border Interviews. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's interview and gained some valuable insights into the world of municipal politics in the city of Beaumont, Alberta. Now, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platforms or by visiting us on YouTube at Cross Border Network. Your support means the world to us. So share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community, and help keep the conversation going. Till next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we will be back with a brand new episode of Cross Border Interviews later. Till then, everyone.